Hello everyone and welcome to Talking Point. My name is Rowan O'Gell. I'm a Senior Research Fellow at Monash University and the Deputy Strategic Lead at the National Addiction and Mental Health Surveillance Unit, or NAMSU, at Turning Point. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the people of the Kulin Nations, on whose land both Turning Point and Monash University operates. And I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Attendees to this Talking Point session may be based elsewhere, so we pay our respects to their elders on the lands from wherever you're joining us today. Today's Talking Point is quite exciting. I say that because for the first time, Talking Point has a panel, and we're going to follow the following program. We're going to hear a little bit about the background to our team and some of the work we do. We're going to talk about the history of AOD stats and have a working demonstration of some of the features on the site. We're going to hear about stakeholder engagement and how we went through the process of keeping our partners and collaborators and stakeholders involved through the redevelopment. And we're going to finish by looking forward at the launch of a new bulletin series and some of the future capabilities that are still to come. At the end of the talks, we will have a Q&A and a panel. We'll answer questions that you put forward to us. For those unfamiliar with the Zoom webinar, you won't be able to ask a question directly today or show your video, but you will be able to ask questions using the Q&A function. So at any time as our panelists are speaking, please use that Q&A button to ask your questions, and we'll endeavour to get through as many as we can through the session. So the NAMSU team is led by Professor Debbie Scott, and as a group, we aim to reduce the harms of alcohol and other drugs, self-harm, mental ill health, and violence through the creation, analysis, and interpretation of public health surveillance data. And in order to do this, we use a series of novel methodologies and unique data sets, including a world-first National Ambulance Surveillance System, or NAS, derived from paramedic clinical records. And these help us to identify the when, the where, and contributing factors of acute mental health, suicide, and alcohol and other drug harms across the community. Our team partners with all levels of government to leverage data to inform and influence policy and community-based public health approaches. In addition to working directly with government, we also provide data to the community through AOD stats. And here's our wonderful new logo. Over and above that, I think our team is quite unique. We have a diverse area of content expertise with leading researchers and data analysts. And this really allows us to provide a multidisciplinary capability that breaks down some of the traditional barriers across the alcohol and other drug and mental health fields. I'd like to introduce you to today's speakers and subsequent panel. So Sam Campbell develops and deploys machine learning models to automate the annotation of clinical records for the NAS and identifies and implements strategies to leverage Turning Point's enormous store of proprietary data. Sam is most definitely a technical wizard, and we'll be talking about all of the fun and back-end things to do with AOD stats today. Jess Killian is a research fellow who's worked across many different projects at Turning Point since 2011. She's been instrumental in the redevelopment of the Alcohol Statistics Series and Drug Stats Handbook into Victoria's Alcohol and Drug Online Interactive Mapping website, and this has led to AOD stats today. And Jess will cover some of the background into how we've got to where we are. Adam Scott has worked at Turning Point as a research assistant since 2014. He has a PhD in business sustainability and a master's degree in psychology. He teaches at Swinburne Online, is an editor and researcher at the APO, and also has a keen interest in stakeholder engagement. And he'll be talking about some of that process with us. No project involves just the 3 or 4 of us, but really a whole team that has helped put this together. So I'd like to acknowledge both current and former staff from NAMSU and previously the population health team at Turning Point, who have assisted at all levels with extraction, data coding and analysis of all of the different variables that are included on our site. And I'd also like to acknowledge the Victorian Department of Health, who are our partners and collaborators on this project, and welcome to those joining from the Department of Health today. AOD Stats has a redevelopment group that has been working over the last 18 months to get us to this point. And so all of the people here have played a significant role in getting the site to where it is today. And to all of you, I say thank you. It's not been the easiest time to redevelop and rework a site, but we've got there in the end. So to provide you with some context, well, AOD Stats provides information on harms related to alcohol, illicit and pharmaceutical drugs in Victoria. AOD Stats data are obtained from numerous sources, ranging from government departments through to alcohol and drug treatment agencies, including Turning Point itself, and the ambulance data are derived from NAS. There's a whole history to this project, which will be covered in the next section of the talk. But the final point on this slide is the one that I'd like you to focus on, that this really is an evolving site and resource. So what you see today is most certainly not the final iteration, and we look forward to providing you with more data going forward in the future. I'm now going to pass on to Jess.
Thanks, Ron. Today, I'll be giving you a brief history of AOD Stats and provide a short demonstration of the new website. This slide gives an outline of the history of AOD Stats. Firstly, looking at the left column in blue. In 1999, Turning Point began producing 2 statistical handbooks, the Victorian Alcohol Statistics Series and the Victorian Drug Statistics Handbook. These were both large volumes, approximately 350 pages, and were produced annually. The aim of these handbooks was to describe the major patterns of alcohol and drug use and associated harms in Victoria. The purpose was to provide a convenient statistical resource for key stakeholders. In 2014, both of these handbooks were redeveloped and converted into an online interactive mapping website, namely AOD Stats. Now looking on the right side, the yellow column for the history of AMBO AOD Stats. In 1998, Turning Point began producing annual reports of ambulance attendances. These reports first began reporting heroin-related attendances in metropolitan Melbourne. And then over time, this increased to include alcohol and other drugs, and also the whole of Victoria. The aim was to examine alcohol and drug-related events attended by ambulance paramedics in Victoria. These reports were produced annually in order to provide convenient statistical resources for key stakeholders. In 2016, the report was converted into AMBO AOD Stats, which was modelled off the AOD Stats, but it only included ambulance data. These 2 sites were then combined into a single site in 2019 to make it easier and more user-friendly. The data for AOD Stats includes data from a range of sources, including health data, such as hospital admission data, and telephone and online counselling service data, road crash data, such as serious road injuries, and crime data, including assaults and family violence incidents. Ambulance data, which is coded by specialist Turning Point research staff for the involvement of alcohol and drugs, is also included. And whilst these data sources are not initially designed, whilst these data sources were not designed for research purposes, they provide very rich data, which is very useful for surveillance and population statistics. On the previous website, the interactive maps used Adobe Flash software, and this expired last year. So as Rowan mentioned, this provided us with an opportunity to redevelop the website and relaunch this year. And we use Tableau software to do that. So now I'll get to the demonstration of the new site. You'll come to the website, you'll see some tabs across the top. This gives information about our data, any updates, any acknowledgements, and any links. Contacts list that you can subscribe to, a how to use tab, frequently asked questions, and then the Explore Data button. This is the button that you will most likely use most of the time. However, in your own time, feel free to look at some of the other information we include about our data. So when I click on Explore Data, this takes you to each of our data sets, and they are linked, they are shown down the page. We have ambulance attendances, hospital admissions, direct line, counselling online, serious road injuries, deaths, assaults, and family violence down the bottom when I get to the bottom. Today's demonstration, I'd like to show you ambulance attendances. When I click on the link, it takes a little bit of time to load. However, you'll notice that we have 3 different maps: the state of Victoria, the whole state, then metro regional, and then local government areas, as well as some definitions about our drugs and data and the methods that we use, which you can have a look at in your own time. For today's demonstration, I'd like to go to the LGA map. So I'll scroll down to the bottom. You can see the map of Victoria divided into local government areas. You'll see the local government areas listed down the left-hand side. And then we have across the top here, we have our visualization types, the year, substance type, age groups, and our gender. For today's demonstration, I'd like to select illicit drugs as a whole. So that's any illicit drug involvement in an ambulance attendance. And if you just wait a little while for it to load, the new numbers will load up. And this gives you the total for each of the years, the whole 10-year time. Also, I can select an LGA. So I'm going to choose Casey as an example. And you'll see this highlight on the map in purple there. It gives you the total number, as I mentioned, for these years, but I would like to find out about one financial year. So the final financial year is the 2020-2021 financial year. The years are displayed with the first half of the financial year. So 2020 means 2020, 2021. So now the data has updated and it gives me over 600 for that financial year for any illicit drugs involved, for all genders and all age groups. But I would like to only see those aged 20 to 24. So I will uncheck all age groups and then reselect the ones I'm interested in. And I just wait for that to load. And now the map loads up with that, and also the data is provided. And then females also. So as you can see, you can pick and choose whichever category you'd like. I will just go back to all for now, because I'd like to show you the trend. The time series can give you a trend across all years for the 10 years available. So you can see back in the 2011, 2012 financial year. As I mentioned, it's the first half of the financial year that's displayed on the axis. However, when you hover over, you will see that it does say the 2011 to 2012 financial year. That increases up to approximately 16,000. Now that's for all any illicit drugs in all areas. But again, I'd like to select Casey as an example. And now this gives me the data for Casey. And similarly, I can choose 1 year, 5 years. Yeah. So I'll just let that update. And then you'll notice another graph underneath at the bottom. This displays our police co-attendants, so those where police also attend their event with paramedics, and those that are transported to hospital. So they provide the numbers that are transported to hospital down the bottom. So if I select that, it changes to those transported to hospital and gives you a proportion as well when you do the hover over. And finally, we do the same thing, a trend series including rates per 100,000. Then we also have a population pyramid which shows numbers and rates for ages and genders. So you'll see when you hover over there for females and males, you get the count. You also get your rate by age group, rate by gender, and then rate by age and gender combined. And just noting that Casey is still selected. If you wanted this for a different LGA or multiple LGAs, I can press Control and select multiple LGAs, which I can give you an example by holding Control. I'd like Brimbank as well, and it updates the numbers there. Just go back. So that was a very brief demonstration. Feel free to do that in your own time. And yeah, there's the 2 LGAs I selected when I go back to the map. And we also have some demonstration videos as well that we are releasing too. Okay, having access to downloadable data was always going to be in the plan, as per our previous website. However, this has been a little bit more challenging this time due to software capabilities and the nature of our data and ethical requirements. Therefore, it has taken a little bit longer than expected. Here's an example of the data download sheets. They will be Excel based and you will be able to download them for each map. The data can be filtered across the top. You'll have drug categories and data sets, financial year or calendar year, depending on the data set. You'll be able to filter by the category, whether it's the total number you're interested in, males, females, or age group. And then across the page in the columns, you will have the location. So for this example, I've just provided the Victorian state. However, if I had downloaded the LGA download sheet, the LGAs will be listed across the page in the columns. So these are coming very, very soon. As I said, they've taken a bit longer and it's been a little bit challenging to get these ready. So watch this space. Finally, I'd like to thank everyone. I'd like to thank the people and organisations for access to the data, particularly Ambulance Victoria, Victorian Department of Health, Registry of Birth, Deaths and Marriages, Vic Roads and Crime Stats, who provide a lot of our data sources, but also to Turning Point staff and the teams at Turning Point for our own data sets, which include ambulance data, which has been specially coded, and the Direct Line and Counselling Online service data. Thank you.
My name is Adam Scott, and I am going to talk about the stakeholder engagement that we did in this project. This can kind of be put under the buzzword of human-centered design or co-design. Within that, you may have heard of another buzzword called user research or user experience research. I will add that there's only 2 types of, I guess, organizations that call their customers users. That's drug dealers and tech companies, so go and figure. There's multiple definitions of human-centered design, but there is a consensus that it's around problem solving that puts people at the heart of the design process. And there's multiple ways in which human-centered design can be done. Some elements can be selected, others can be left out. And it really depends on the type of projects you're undertaking and the resource constraints as well. So this is a visualization of the human-centered design process. I'm going to talk to the discovery, which you can see boxed here at the bottom. But first, I'll talk about the whole process actually. But first is that you should align, and align is really people come together in the project and talk about how the project should go, what are the goals of the project. Once the goals are in place, and you have an idea, that's when you go and talk to the people who'll be using your product or service, and in this case, the website. different types of methodologies that can be used to gain that information, qualitative, quantitative. Ethnographic studies are quite popular. We undertook both qualitative and quantitative. We'll talk to that in a moment. Once you've got the information, you understand what your users want, and then you come back to the table and you start to design the service. And that continues through to eventually when you do deliver. I will say that this kind of model presents it in a linear process, which is not actually true in reality. It's often very messy, and probably a messy circle would be a more accurate representation. Human-centered design is not new to the AOD sector by any means. It has been used to design AOD use services, policy, smartphone intervention applications, but little has been published in relation to human-centered design in creating health surveillance systems such as the site we have curated. That said, there are thousands of articles published on using human-centered design for website design, just not within the AOD sector. So our process really took, two areas. Primarily, we really wanted to understand what our users liked and disliked about the previous version of the site. Secondary, we really wanted to understand how people use the site and why they used it. And the third part, I guess, is confirming some of our own ideas and testing them with the public. So you could say we use both an inductive and deductive process here. So what was our process? Well, first we contacted participants who had previously subscribed to our mailing list, and we asked them to come and answer either a survey or participate in an interview. This took place in November 2020. We conducted 8 interviews and 3 questionnaires. That may not seem like a lot, but that was a 30% response rate. So our initial mailing list was reasonably small. What I found was that interviews were most useful in this process because you can really get those how and why questions answered. So people may tell you that they don't like the functionality of the site, but in an interview, obviously here you can ask them why. Why is that? What in particular didn't you like about a particular function? How can this function be improved? So yes, surveys are useful, but if you are undertaking a process like this yourself, if you can take or undertake interviews, that would be recommended. So the initial insights gained, probably came under functionality. So we had an understanding that the old site was a bit tricky to navigate, didn't look as visually appealing as it could be. And we understood then from talking to people the importance of keeping the site simple. So you'll see from the new site, there's only a few tabs that you can click on. It's quite hard to get lost on the site. So we had a real, design mandate of keeping it simple. We understood what services current users liked. And as Jess mentioned before, people really like data exports. And also, we learned how people actually use the site. So when creating a product like this and putting it out there to the public, you may find that people don't actually always use it as you initially intended. And I'll talk to that in a minute. But first I'll talk about the second round. So we started the second round of interviewing in November this year. And we started by re-interviewing those and resurveying those that were in round 1, and we asked them, are you happy with the changes that were made, and can you see your input reflected into the design process? And the majority of people have up to now been happy with the design changes. I won't go too much into the actual findings because I am seeking new participants to talk to. So at the end of this presentation, if you'd like to talk to me or talk to the rest of the team, if you could get in contact, that would be great. 2 findings I will talk about. One is who actually uses the site. So it's fascinating to know that we have a variety of occupations. We have journalists, we have researchers, we have policy wonks, we have clinicians. People are predominantly from the non-profit sector, but also federal, states, and local government. What I did notice is this thirst for data. Everyone we talk to would say, yeah, it's great, we enjoy the data that's provided, but we need more data. We need police data, we need ambulance data. Police data, hospital data, counselling data. So there is this wider thirst for data, and maybe this is a reflection on society, where we are living in a data-hungry society now. And I guess we're not sure if more data does create a better product. Maybe it's the quality of data or how the data is used, which is maybe a more important question to ask. And I mentioned before that sites can be used in different ways than their intended design purpose. And one example is that I was talking to a clinician, and he did use the sites to write reports, but also found it useful to showing his AOD clients, showing clients where hospital attendances were going for certain drug-related cases. And he found that his clients were interested in where certain drug overdoses were happening in which LGAs. This is a reference list, but I will bring your attention to the second reference on the list. A really interesting playbook that was created by the Department of Premier and Cabinet. And they talk about how the Victorian government are using human-centered design in some of their policy work. So I do recommend having a read of that if you can find it. Thank you very much.
So hello to everyone watching. My name's Sam. I'm going to talk about basically why we chose Tableau. As Jess mentioned, we used to have all our visualizations built in Flash, and we've moved on to a newer platform to make everything look nicer and be much more usable. So I'll talk about why we chose Tableau, why it's probably the right choice for you as well. And then I'll also discuss some upcoming functionality and some new releases that we've prepared. So first of all, just to sort of set the landscape, if you want to build any sort of dashboard, any collection of visualizations that people can interrogate, you have a lot of options. The big ones that you'll probably know of are Tableau itself and Power BI. Don't use Power BI. I won't talk about it in this at all. I'll be talking about Tableau mostly. But you also have a number of open source options. I'll mostly be discussing D3, data-driven documents, just because it's the greatest contrast to Tableau. So first of all, why would you use Tableau to build visualizations? It's not particularly powerful. It has a very limited feature set. There's not a lot that you can do with it. You can't customize it very much. You can do some palette swapping and some basic typesetting, but other than that, you're kind of stuck with what Tableau presents to you. It's also relatively slow compared to other options. And during development, it's really memory hungry, so you'll get a lot of crashes. Tableau will just close itself down and say, nope, you can't do anything anymore. It is easy to use, but most options aren't easily surfaced to you as the developer, so it can be really frustrating if you're trying to do anything custom or special. And finally, it's quite expensive. You have an ongoing license that you have to pay if you want your visualizations to stay live and be usable by other people. But in general, it's kind of good enough. It's got a decent feature set. It's reasonably flexible. It is performant once you've compiled everything and surfaced it to end users. And again, it's really intuitive to use. But just to be clear, in case it seems like I'm going well on aggregate, it's pretty good compared to open source options. On every one of those metrics, something like D3, Plotly, any of those other options are just straight up better. I'll hopefully discuss why that doesn't end up mattering. So to start with, there's a little run through of how you would go about making a visualization in Tableau. In this case, it's just a simple line graph plotting sales over time. You open Tableau, it'll take you to the data source sheet. Click add connection, select whatever file you want. Pretty much anything that you're going to be using, Excel spreadsheets, that sort of thing, is going to be supported by Tableau. It'll import it automatically and take you to a data sheet. All you then do is, in this case, drag the order date into the column section, sales into the row section, and that's it. Tableau will impute how to subset or aggregate the data. You usually do that pretty well. Sometimes it gets it wrong, but most of the time it's correct. And that's it. You've got an interactive visualization with hoverable tooltips. You can zoom in and out. You can add filters to let users control what data is shown. And with a couple of clicks, Tableau will just provide you with some HTML that you can embed wherever web stuff can be rendered. So on a website, obviously, in an email, that sort of thing. And you can share it with anyone. But the insidious thing here is that as simple as the interface looks, that's about all there is to it. Every Tableau line graph is going to look pretty much like this one does. You can remove grid lines, change the colors, add or remove labels, that sort of thing, but it's going to end up looking like a Tableau line graph. That's because Tableau is a highly opinionated piece of software. It assumes, for instance, that you should use year out of the date, you should use a sum of sales, it wants all of your data to be columnar with a couple of exceptions. And in general, you can only do what Tableau is going to let you do. In contrast, here is how you'd develop front-end visualizations with D3. You'd write the base code yourself. The quote I've got down there in the bottom left from Don Knuth is a bit grandiose. The guy next to it, slapping the keyboard, is close to the day-to-day reality of programming. But it does capture the fact that writing code is a very difficult, time-consuming activity that involves a lot of abstract reasoning. Making visualizations is a fairly simple example of coding, but it still isn't trivial. And it's not something that can just be picked up by any given person. So in general, unless you yourself are a programmer, you're going to need to get some developers to do it for you. And this is just the visualization. With the exception of things like Tableau and Power BI, where it's basically an already complete infrastructure for you. If you want to make a custom dashboard, you're not making just a dashboard. You need to have the data itself. You need to have a storage system for that data, a library of logic for wrangling it. You'll need to be able to broadcast everything from a server, and you'll need at least one graphical application so that users can actually see it. So if you want to build something in D3, pretty much everything here needs to be custom built or cobbled together from different templates by a developer for you. I've included a number of questions that you could expect if you did get involved with a developer. Most of them are more difficult to answer than they seem at first glance. It's never easy to explain precisely what you want, especially when you're talking to someone that doesn't have the domain knowledge that you do. And likewise, it's really tough to explain what your data are, how they interrelate, what you need from them, how they should be represented in a proper database. And you either are not going to have back and front end infrastructure, or if you do, it's worse a lot of the time. It can be much harder to integrate things with existing systems than it is to just build a new system. Something like D3 is going to be absolutely incredible if you do use it. It's genuinely what you should be using if you need something polished and pixel perfect, and you have a lot of money. But the trade-off against Tableau's licensing fees is that the development time is substantially higher. You're going to need actual developers instead of business users to code the solution, and you'll need to build your own backend for it. So anytime you hear these questions, phonetically, this is what is going to be asked, but the sound that you should hear is piles of cash just being set alight. Here are some examples of what you could build in D3. Each one of these is highly interactive, although I've only animated the bottom left one. Very expressive and very difficult to interpret at a glance. So in the top left, I've got the number of downloads of the D3 package over time from the Node Package Manager. On the top right, I believe this is frequency and types of changes made to a code base, but because I got this picture from somewhere and then lost the source of it, it's actually really difficult to just look at it and figure out what it's doing. In the bottom left, it's a bubble chart representing the frequency and amount of funding for grants over different years. It's actually a lot more complicated than it looks. What's happening here is that D3 is being used to dynamically simulate points of gravitation, and it's assigning different forces of attraction to each individual node or bubble in there as you click between those options. Cannot do any of that in Tableau. You get nowhere with it. You'll hit a hard brick wall very quickly. But you don't really need to. I picked these three visualizations because each of them can be replaced with a simple bar chart, and it's probably going to be easier to understand for just about anybody. The dot point there I've got about the botanical gardens versus local forests is a metaphor I'm stealing from the developer Alex Krupp, who said that out of the 60-odd thousand tree species in the world, most people, if you put a gun to their head, could name about 1%. But if you put any one of us in a eucalyptus forest, suddenly we can point out gum trees all over the place. When you expose people only to the things that they're familiar with, simple visualizations of the type that Tableau allows you to build, the only thing that Tableau allows you to build, they're going to be more productive and much less error prone. error prone, which is really important for data such as these where we're presenting very sensitive statistics. That's not to say that people are dumb, but simply that complexity, although it can lead to some sort of elegance, usually obfuscates what you're trying to communicate. And you should always attempt to make things as clear as possible. The Zipf's law thing basically just says, use things that people are familiar with, make that the most common thing that you're presenting. So in that way, Tableau's constraints, its limitations, sort of force you to only use things that are well validated and people are actually going to understand. Finally, as a result of how much easier Tableau is to use and how it's only let us build what's absolutely necessary for us, which, as Adam said, we'll try to record something and make it available to you. But basically, we used it to create cross tabulations, several line graphs, population pyramid, and a lot of interactive maps. In making that development really easy, we've lowered the barrier to entry to contributing to the new website. Pretty much anyone in our team without any experience can jump in and with a little bit of instruction start to produce really valuable work really quickly. And this has freed us up to start pursuing other things. What I've got here is our latest AOD stats bulletin. If you go to the contact tab on the website, you can subscribe to that and start getting it. We hope to present interesting insights that we can find from our research and reporting, some of which is presented here. And we've also been able to scale up our reporting to include additional data sets on AOD stats. I think the ones that we have upcoming are treatment service data and bloodborne virus data, which should be up there in the next month or so, hopefully. Jess can clarify that once we get to the question section. And finally, we're also able to extend the feature set of the dashboard itself. Can't really give away too much until it's finalized, but we should be able to dramatically increase the granularity of how we label remoteness, which is, of course, very exciting, as I'm sure you'll gather. That's it for me. Thank you for listening, and I think we're going to a Q&A section now.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you to all of our speakers. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists to turn on their cameras and unmute. Thank you for all of the Q&As that have been coming through. As our speakers have noticed, we will re-record the live demonstration and send it out to you so that you can follow some of those along. In addition to that, we've developed a series of animations which do demonstrate different features of the site. So the first one of those will go up this afternoon, and then there's a series of these planned over time as well. So there's a few different ways that you'll be able to see how different features on the site work. I'm going to ask our panelists some of the questions that have been coming through during the presentations. Audience members, feel free to ask some more. That if we get to them, we can, but we will wind up right on time. So Jess, obviously data is a very important part of the site. So can you please tell us when we expect the 2020/21 AMBO data? And this is a double header, but is there a plan to include the VADC data? And if so, when?
Thanks, Ron. Yeah, sure. So ambulance data for the financial year 2021, we actually already have released that. It's already on the website. But some of our other data sets aren't quite up to the 2021 financial year, or some data sets are calendar year. So we do have counselling online by calendar year is up to 2020. And some of our other data sets go to the 2019-2020 financial year. These will be released the next lot in the next release. So we're going to have 2 releases per year, as per similar to our old site. So March, end of March and end of September are our kind of deliverables. So you will expect twice per year to have an update of some of the data each time. And in relation to the BADC, which is the new kind of ADIS, it used to be called ADIS, the treatment service data. Yes, we do plan to include that on the website as per our previous one. Considering that has changed to a new kind of system now. As I said, it was ADIS, now it's changed to the VADC, the Victorian Alcohol and Drug Counselling Service. That will be released, fingers crossed, in March. So that'll be the next iteration. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you, Jess. We had quite a few questions about data, so I think I'll reiterate Adam's earlier point that people are data hungry and hungry thirsty at the moment. So Adam, you mentioned that user feedback had led to the improvement in terms of site functionality. What were some of the most important or interesting changes that were made to the site?
Good question. I think personally it would be the simplicity of the site. If you recall the previous site, it was pretty buggy and it was really hard to get what you want out of it. So I feel the new site, you go to the main page, you know what you're getting. It's clearly designed. You know that it's an AOD stats and there's maps in the opening page, and there's a big button on the right-hand side that says explore data. So I think that is a big one. It just looks visually appealing, and that ties in to the tabular data presentation as well. That is nice and visually appealing. So I guess that's one thing we learned, is keep it simple and make it pretty. People love to click on pictures as well. So if you click explore data, and you'll see all the different databases we have, and there's nice pictures there. And it may seem trivial and it may seem really obvious, but yeah, making sites look as pretty as possible is a really good way to entice people to use the site. I also like how we've included definitions of the variables, and also discussed some of the limitations of the site as well. And this all came from user feedback, people telling us that this is what they wanted. Thanks.
Thank you, Adam. I have a question for Sam. How easy is Tableau for a first-time user, or I guess people who are unfamiliar with that platform?
I suppose it sort of depends. As long as the user is fairly computer literate, it's really intuitive. It's mostly a drag and drop interface. It's sort of complies to a what you see is what you get kind of interface. So it is really easy to use. That said, a lot of the more advanced is kind of scare quotes there, features aren't surfaced very well, so you would have to do a fair bit of research to come to terms with those. But yeah, in general, pretty easy to pick up.
Thanks, Sam. I have another data-related question. So Jess, I'll direct this one to you, but on the site, there's male and female genders. Can you comment on why we don't report other genders on the site?
Mm-hmm. It actually depends on data sets. So some data sets do actually capture that information. They capture male, gender, and other. Some data sets don't, but the numbers for those data sets that do would be quite small as well. So we kind of chose, or we didn't really choose. It was more of a consistency type thing across the board, that we'll stick to male and female, just because not all data sets do include that. Most of our data comes from, as I mentioned, not for research purposes. So it's, collecting health data for people in hospital, or, people that are being counselled or things like that. So quite a lot is missing, can be missing, and some data sets don't even collect it. So it's basically we've just chosen the one that has the most data available, male and female, and then they're missing, so we don't include other.
Thanks, Jess. Adam, during your talk, you mentioned human-centered design. Can you just expand upon that a little bit? I know we limited the number of minutes that you had to speak today, but can you talk perhaps to why it's important in the development of sites like AOD Stats?
Yeah, sure. So like I mentioned, it is putting people at the heart of the design process. So really it means getting out from behind your desk and talking to people. And there's lots of famous examples of organizations not doing this and creating really crappy products. And I think I won't mention any, but I think we all probably use them on a daily basis. Two quite famous examples come from, I guess, the corporate sector. One was GoGet. So GoGet, or sorry, I probably should say, an organization similar to GoGet is where you have a car sharing service. So they launched this in Japan. And what they were finding is that Japanese people were renting the cars, but not driving anywhere. And the organization couldn't work out why they weren't driving. And it turns out that people were just using the cars to have work meetings or to catch up with friends. So they wouldn't drive them anywhere. The company was making no money because they made a lot of money from the kilometers driven. And because Japan is so busy, people would just sit there and talk. So yeah, the way the product was designed didn't use a human-centered design approach. They hadn't gone out and talked to people. They didn't understand. And another example comes from in China, the big DIY US company called Home Depot. They tried to launch in China and they failed miserably. And that's because the organization didn't understand that middle-class Chinese people don't like DIY. Labor's cheap enough for them to hire people to do it themselves, and so for other people to do it. And DIY is almost seen as something beneath the middle classes. So Home Depot failed miserably in China. So that is, two examples of why, when designing products and services, you should get out and talk to people who will be using the services.
Thanks, Adam. Sam, I have a question for you, and this is, I guess, a live question, but I noticed that all of the maps operate on a world-based schema, so you can zoom in and out to all of the world. If you restricted this to Victoria only, which is the data level that AOD Stats operates at, would this speed up loading times when changing the different click-down options?
Oh, I see. In absolute terms, yes. If you restricted the base map only to the geometry that we're interested in, you'd shave off a couple of milliseconds. Likewise, if you restricted the map only to that area of the world as well. But in real terms, no, just because that loading of the map will be bound by the geometries that are actually plotting on top of the base map rather than the base map itself. And overall, everything is bound by just the size of the data that Tableau is using. So if we want to have any speed ups, the optimizations will have to be at the data level rather than at the visualization level.
Thank you, Sam. Jess, I've got a couple of questions while you were giving one of your last answers here about the ambulance data going up to 2020. Can you clarify if that's the financial year 1920 or 2021?
Yes, so apologies, sorry if I was confusing before. So it goes up to 2021 financial year, but it's displayed as the first half of the financial year. So 2020 is the 2021 financial year. If you hover over in the map, it will actually say financial year 2020 to 21. It's just in the actual Tableau in the graph, we weren't able to put the slash mark. So that may be a work in progress if we can figure that out. But yes, it does go up to 2020, 21.
Thanks, Jess. I've got another one here about when we do updates, how will people know that the new data has gone live with those extractions?
Yeah, so we encourage people to subscribe because those that do subscribe to our email list, we will send out an email to say we have released a new set of data, and when those bulletins also are available, we will also send them out. So there's a bit of a bonus to subscribing. You do get information a little bit quicker, it will be on our website as well. You will notice that there'll be a new year on there, but for those that have subscribed, you will get that information just that little bit quicker because we'll send out an email.
Thanks very much, Jess. Being mindful of sticking to time, I think I would like to thank all of today's speakers and for giving all of the insights into the redevelopment of AOD Stats and also talking about where we're going next. I would also like to reiterate, following Sam's launch of the bulletin and just talking then in her final Q&A that this is an ongoing, planned activity where we will release different bulletins on different topics. The first one you can find on the Turning Point website or on the AOD website, AOD Stats website. I think this is a wonderful way to keep up to date with the latest things that we're noticing. So I would encourage you to sign up to our mailing list so that you do get those bulletins first. Otherwise, please be in contact with us if you've got any other questions. I'd also like to thank everyone who's stayed with us till the end. I know we're getting close to the end of the year and many things are due or coming up. So best wishes with getting those over the line before the end of the year. But also, I wish you all the best for the holiday period and hope that you can have some downtime before we hit 2022. So thank you again. Best wishes.